Hey, I'm Justin and welcome to my channel, DiabeTech. Here on this channel, I talk all things diabetes and diabetes technology. I get into management, app walkthroughs, how different types of technologies can help you manage or make just living with diabetes easier. So make sure you tune in every week, every Friday for a new episode. There's a subscribe button down there. Click that, subscribe to the channel, and if you want, click that bell so you get alerts as soon as the videos go up. Now, you probably know me from TikTok and Instagram, where I've been super active with diabetes videos and content, but the reason I came out with this channel was because I found that I didn't have enough time in those 1.5 to 3-minute videos to do deep dives. On here, I'm gonna be interviewing people like today's episode, and also just going over all the tips that I have for management and going over some really cool technology. So I hope that you tune in because I've got a lot coming for you every single Friday. Today's episode is super exciting. I got to sit down with Meg of Beats and Beaties and talk everything Omnipod 5. She's been on it for a year. I'm not on Omnipod 5. I do use an Omnipod Dash and a Dexcom G7, and together I use those with an app called Loop, which is a non-FDA cleared automated insulin delivery system. If you want to learn more about that, I'll throw a link down in the description that I made that kind of goes into it. It's a little outdated, and I am coming out with a new video on Loop 3.0. And if you want to learn about the Dexcom G7, Meg and I have another video going over that on her YouTube channel. I've got her socials and her channel down in the description as well. But for now, let's talk everything Omnipod 5. Thank you for joining me, Meg. I'm very excited to talk about this.
I'm so excited to talk about the Omnipod 5 because it's such a cool system.
Yes. For those of you who don't know, Meg and I spoke 2 weeks ago about the Dexcom G7, which I have been wearing. I'm actually wearing it on my abdomen right now, which it's not technically FDA cleared for there in the US, but it is in Europe. And I've got to say, I'm really enjoying it there. And Meg is an Omnipod 5 user for how long have you been on it? Oh my gosh,
since like June or July. So like, is that 8 months?
That is
8.
I mean, that's like almost a year. So this is a really, you've definitely put it through like the field test. So this is going to be like a great conversation. If you all want to check out our last video, that is on Meg's YouTube channel, all about the Dexcom G7. This live, if you can't stay the whole time, this will be on my YouTube channel. You can find those links. You can find my YouTube channel in the link in my bio and Meg's in hers. And yeah, so today we're going to be focusing on the Omnipod 5. Before we get into that, Meg, why don't you introduce to us who you are and what you do on your socials?
Awesome. So hi everyone, my name's Meg. I'm over on Instagram at Beats and Beaties, also on YouTube and TikTok. I essentially just talk about my life with type 1 diabetes. I'm currently in school. I'm finishing my master's in nutrition to become a dietitian. So I really want to work with people with type 1. I love health and fitness and learning to live your best life with diabetes. I think that's something that I struggled with a really long time myself. I was diagnosed when I was 5. Teenage years, childhood years, even my early 20s were pretty rough with diabetes. So I definitely found my groove in the past 5 years or so. So my goal in life is to help others do the same with that. And yeah, so I'm so excited to share about my journey with Omnipod 5 today.
That's incredible. I'm excited to talk to you about it. For those of you who don't know me, I am DiabeTech, Justin. And unlike Meg, I was just diagnosed 2 years ago. I'm very new to the space, and I didn't have to, go through childhood with this disease. And so I'm really excited to kind of talk to you about your journey, especially kind of all the different treatments you've gone through. I did MDI for a bit, and then I started a pump about 6 months into my diagnosis, and I've been on Omnipod as well. Not Omnipod 5 though, and that's why I'm also very curious to hear what you have to say. But yeah, I think we should get right into it. The first thing I really want to start with you, especially since you've been living with this for so long, is kind of tell me about your journey with type 1 diabetes. When were you diagnosed? And then kind of tell me about the different forms of treatment you've kind of gone through your life.
So I was diagnosed when I was 5. This is 1999. So you can do the math to find out how old I am. I started, my first few months, so I guess year, I was on MDI, but then the first pump that I was on was the Cosmo, which, if you know the Cosmo, like, such a throwback. It was like, it was like the 2000s. They had that like see-through tech look, Do you know what I'm talking about? So
yes,
it came in like blue and like green and purple, and like, that was like so cool to me. That's what I remember about that pump. It was in black and white. It was literally just gave you insulin. And so I was on that from about age like 7 to maybe age 12-ish. I don't remember exactly. Then I went on to the Animus pump, which is not around anymore, but did last, maybe went out of business a few years ago, or stopped being made. So I was on that from about age like 12 to maybe 14, 15. And then I went, like, that was height of high school.
And these are tube pumps.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Right?
These are both tubed pumps, no looping technology. I wasn't on a CGM, just like super basic pumps. For anyone, like, I know we wanted to talk a little bit about like how a pump works. Like, these were like the most basic that you could get. It just delivered like the basal insulin, just like a little bit all the time of your short acting. Then you could, give some for correction, give some for bolus. But that was kind of the extent of those. It was pretty basic technology.
Great. And then, okay, so you were at those pumps. Then what came next after those?
So after those, this was about like my first year in high school. I was like, did not want anything on me. Like, for me, a tubed pump felt like just like having like a ball and chain. Like, it was just like, to me, it was always in the way. I was always taking it off, like at school, like at gym class. Like, I just take it off and leave it off for the rest of the day. Like, I just didn't want to deal with it. And that obviously has a lot of danger to it, because if you stop taking your short acting insulin when you're on a pump, like, that can very quickly lead to bad things. So I ended up going on to shots, again, like age 14, 15-ish, and was on shots for about 10 years. And that was probably the best option for me at that time. But definitely very happy to be back on a pump. I've been on the Omnipod for about 4 or 5 years now. I went on with the Dash, and I was on the Dash for about 3 years. Sorry if I have my years wrong. Things blend together. So for about 3 years, I was on Dash, and then I just switched to the 5 a few months ago.
Great. Okay, so I know we have people who are joining us that don't know much about insulin pumps, right? So can you tell us, what is Omnipod? What makes it kind of different than other pumps? And how does it work? What is it doing?
So again, like, basically, to describe like how an insulin pump works is you have your pump, and it's either like, here's what the pump looks like, the pod. Thank you.
I've got one here.
Bottle right there. So you have that, and that holds about 200 units of insulin, short acting. So you're only using one type of insulin, and then it's giving you just a little bit all the time. That's called your basal, to kind of mimic what your pancreas would do. And then if you eat, or if you have a high blood sugar, you can give yourself a bolus of insulin, so a little bit more, and that can help just keep you in range.
Yeah, and just in case that wasn't clear for anyone, what Meg means by it giving you your basal all day, that means you don't need a shot of long-acting insulin. Mm-hmm. That is your long-acting insulin going throughout the day. Mm-hmm. Just that one type of insulin. So now tell me more about the Omnipod. So how long does it last? How can you use it? Like, tell me about just using it day to day, like swimming, like you can swim with it. Tell us about that experience, kind of.
So the Omnipod, it holds 200 units of insulin. For me, that's 3 days. Some people that might be 2, and sometimes people just change them more frequently if you have like sensitive skin. I personally wear mine for 3 days. It is tubeless, which to me, that is my non-negotiable. Like, I could never go back to a tube to pump. So That's just the best. But it does connect with the controller. And so this is how you actually like plug in how much insulin you want to give it, or any changes, if you need to suspend your insulin, if you need to change your pod, it's all done through this. So that's kind of like how the system works. And did I answer all those questions?
Yeah, I think so. And then the only thing is, like, it is waterproof.
Yes.
I always am swimming with it. I believe it can be like 25 feet for 60 minutes is like, I think what they say. I will say, though, out of the year of using it, I have had one pump failure underwater.
Interesting.
And it actually happened last week in Mexico. But luckily I was nearby. But, like, you know, that was a surprise to me. But that did happen.
What happened?
I was just underwater, like not very deep. And all of a sudden I noticed my like phone was like, your pump has a pump failure. Yeah. And then the pump was just going beep, which is like a pump failure. And I probably had 2 pump failures in a year. They happen. Maybe it wasn't the water, maybe it was something else, but
yeah.
That, you know, just always be prepared.
Yeah.
Really. And then someone said, like, do you still use a pen? No, right? No pens.
No pens.
Needed with this. That this is taking over that long-acting and short-acting. And yes, feel free to be dropping in your questions here. We're going to be taking them throughout this whole live. We're also posting this up on YouTube, on my channel, the link in my bio, where you can ask more questions in case you have to leave early or you just need more questions answered, and we'll get back to you. So let's keep going. Meg, tell us where you like to wear them.
Yeah. So back of arms, I really like that spot. My favorites, I like the back of the arms, but my favorite has to be my stomach. That's where it is right now. I'll try to show this.
I agree. I agree with that.
So
there's
mine
just
is
something nice
right here right now.
Nice.
So you can kind of do like your upper belly or your lower belly. So there is like some space to work. I'll do my lower back sometimes. I actually like that spot a lot. I find really good absorption there. I don't think that one's FDA approved. And then I also like my legs. Legs can be a little bit tougher with absorption, but in terms of like placement, I actually like my legs the best for like functionality.
I think I'm going to try. I've never done a legs.
Really?
I agree. I think I want to try one.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I love my stomach. I have like 3, you probably can't see it. I have 3 like sunspots here or like tan lines because I kept moving it around. I put it all around my stomach, sides, back, arms. Haven't tried the legs. And what I've learned from my diabetes educator is that as long as you need to be rotating pumps, you can't go back to places within 30 days, as long as you're going at least over 3 inches away from the last site, you should be good with scar tissue and absorption. So that is a super important. Rotate your pumps. Don't forget. Now, do you notice it's there?
I don't because I've been on it for 4 years. So if you're putting it on for the first time, you might be like, what's this thing on my arm? But like over time, and I would say maybe it takes like a few weeks, a month, maybe, you'll be like, oh yeah, geez, I forgot about that. Like I don't notice it's there. The only time I would say is if I'm like in a position where I'm like on it. Like if it's on my leg and I'm laying on my stomach in a yoga class, I'll be like, okay, I feel that. And it feels like laying on your phone. It's not like comfortable, but it doesn't hurt, if that makes sense. So no, I don't really notice it's there.
Yeah.
Really.
I agree. I think that is what's so freeing. I've never used a tube pump, but I feel so free. I forget the pumps here. I don't mind like lying on it when it's on my back and I lie on it. Completely fine, not uncomfortable. I can lay on my side. Like I actually I like laying on it on my side. Like I've never ever had it come off because of the way like I move it.
Yeah, same.
So like super comfortable and like free. Yeah. I completely agree. So and don't ever worry, everyone. We are going to get really into the hardcore Omnipod 5. I really want to do that. I don't know much about Omnipod 5 because I do use Loop. Now, if someone is using MDI right now, why would you recommend someone who's taking multiple daily injections to get on a pump, and specifically maybe why Omnipod 5?
Yeah. So, well, first and foremost, I'll say every single person is different, and like all of our life experiences and our lifestyles are going to push us in different directions. If I was on a pump in high school, it would have been terrible no matter what, probably. Omnipod would have been probably a little bit better than having the tube, but definitely, like, if you're vibing on MDI and you love it, like, go. You do you. So, like, this is by no means like you're a better diabetic or anything like that, or you'll have better control on a pump. Some people, like, genuinely do better on shots. However, for me, I love that you can get more precise dosing. So on MDI, like, I had my pens, I had like the junior ones, so I could give 0.5. But even with that, it's like 0.5 can be a lot of insulin if I don't need that. So I love that I'm able to give, like, I think to 0.05 is like the
0.05. That's a tenth of what a shot can achieve.
Which is just so nice. The ability to have more precise, like, basals. So, like, obviously if you're doing long lasting, like, yeah, you can split your doses or whatever, but you're not going to give yourself 20 doses a day to try to, even it out. So, and we were, I just think there's like a lot more precision that you can get with the pump that you can't get with MDI.
Yeah. On that note, I think one thing I've really enjoyed being on a pump rather than on the shots is, like, when you take your units of Lantus long-acting insulin in the morning, you're stuck with that. Like, that is in your body for the next 24 hours. So, like, what would scare me was, like, I would genuinely be afraid to work out sometimes because it's a little harder. I'd say it's a little harder to control when you're taking that long-acting insulin. It's possible, but I think it involves more being aware of your numbers and, like, even eating to, like, kind of control it. It's been a while that I don't remember, but I just remember being a little more on edge. The nice thing about Omnipod 5 and other systems like this is that it regulates you. So, and we're going to get into that. As soon as it sees that you're going down, it catches you, and you just you feel much safer. Exactly. So, kind of on that note, how does Omnipod 5 stand out, or what changes from Omnipod Dash, the last version, with Omnipod 5?
So this is where we get into, like, auto mode, which is, I think, just such a cool feature. So to put it in perspective, my first priority when choosing a pump was 100% that it was tubeless. Like, to me, and going off a little bit of that last question about MDI, like, tubeless provides the amount of freedom that MDI does, but with more precision. Right. So you're kind of getting the best of both worlds. Like, I don't have to take off my pump if I want to get in the shower, if I want to jump into the pool or whatever. But I'm still able to get that precision. And then with auto mode, that's like the second, to me, really cool thing about it is that you have, and I'll get into this in a second, but you essentially have like 2 levels of automation that are working to get your basals, like, super accurate all the time.
Now, okay, so how does this automation work? Like, tell us about the devices you're wearing, and kind of like, and like, I'm asking you this, like, I kind of know, but I also don't fully know. Like I said, I use Loop, which I have a closed loop system. I'm using an Omnipod Dash with Dexcom G7 now, actually, which is fantastic. But that system that I use, not FDA cleared. We're talking about Omnipod 5. Anyway, I want to learn a lot about it. And it's like the mainstream, like what a lot of people are looking into. But, like, okay, tell me about, like, what are you wearing, kind of the placement we can get into also. And what are they doing? Yeah.
So essentially, like, the basics of the Omnipod 5 auto mode is that your pod, so the actual pod, talks to the Dexcom transmitter. And it tells it what your blood sugar is. And then it can adjust your basal based on that reading and based on the trend. So it says, hey, like, you're going up. We're going to give you a little bit more basal right now to help steady you out. And vice versa, right? Like, if you're dropping down, like, it'll either decrease or suspend your basal so that you don't go low or you don't go as low. So that's like the first, that's actually like what I consider the second level. But in addition to that, this is the really cool thing about Omnipod 5 that like a lot of other systems, and I'll get into more about how to optimize this in a second, but also what it's doing is it's creating your basals every day based on your past data. So you're not telling it, these are the basals I want to use. It's saying, based on these 8 months of data that we have from you, we predict that this is going to be how much basal insulin you need today. Then, if that's not perfect, then it has that Dexcom on top of it to be like, actually, no, adjust this here, adjust this here, adjust this here, right? So you have this, number one, you have, based on your past total daily insulin amounts, what the pump thinks you need for a basal each day. So you don't have to do basal testing. You don't have to adjust your basal. You don't have to figure out like, was that because I had the wrong insulin to carb ratio or the wrong basal? It just knows, right? And then on top of that, you have that integration with the Dexcom to have that second layer of automation. So it's really like 2 layers of accuracy so that your basals are as good as they can be.
Tell us about the target range. We had a question that someone mentioned, the target range. How does that work, and can that be adjusted?
Yep, your target range can be adjusted. Right now, the lowest it can go is 110. I'm hoping they come out with something lower than that. But honestly, I usually set like probably like 95 to 125 most of the time. So, which is like right around that 110. I usually wake up, it's actually weird. I usually wake up at 110, like exactly, which is, it just like does it, which is really cool. So yeah, that is how you you can set the target however you want. Yeah, and you can have the target overnight and like during the day if you wanted.
Okay, interesting. So I kind of want to get a little more into that with one of my next question, which is like, tell us about kind of your journey of like getting onto Omnipod 5 and getting onto a closed loop system in general for people who may be a little nervous, and kind of like what that journey was like how it went forward and how maybe you got better or used to it.
So my first week on the Omnipod 5, I was kind of frustrated because I was like, I didn't know what I needed to know in order for it to be optimized. So I'll get into that in a second, like what I wish I would have done. But essentially, I'll say the more willing you are to make changes to your ratios from the start, the faster and more successful that you'll hit that kind of like sweet spot where it knows exactly how much you need per day. If you're going from like a traditional pump to specifically Omnipod 5, I've never been on like a traditional loop system like T-Slim or DIY or anything like that. So I've never had the ability to like adjust my basals on a loop system. So I can't really speak to that in general, but I'll say like it probably took me like maybe 3 weeks once I kind of figured out what I was doing wrong to like implement the changes and then see the success from it. So if I would have done it earlier, I would have seen it earlier. But it took about 3 weeks for me to get to that kind of sweet spot.
Okay. And tell us about that optimizing that you like wish you kind of like knew, or like any tips, I guess, for optimizing it to personalize yourself, I guess. So
I'm gonna explain a little bit of background so that this makes more sense. Tell me if this doesn't make sense in the comments, or just to tell me. So when you have like a traditional pump or like a T-Slim where you where it's a loop system, you can change your basals and you can change your ratios, right? So you have control over those two things. With the Omnipod 5, it's automating the basal part of that. So the only control that you have to tell the algorithm that you need more total daily insulin is to increase your ratios.
Like insulin to carb ratios? Interesting.
So if I notice in the morning that I'm waking up at 120 instead of 110, or that after a meal I'm starting to stay high, I know it's all that I have to change is just bump up my ratios. And by bump up, I mean give more insulin per carb and up my correction factor.
Okay.
Because that's how I tell the algorithm, this is the data that you need. This is how much insulin I need per day to stay in range.
Now,
so if you're on
sorry to interject, but like, what if you don't eat food? Like, because that's tied to, right? Because that's tied to food you're eating. Or does that make, I guess maybe it just all works out because we eat food, but like, I guess, yeah, I am so tied to like my basal needs to be more during night, the dawn effect and like all these things. And like just food to carb ratio, insulin to carb ratio has just always been a separate thing to me. Look, go on. But that's just like something
I don't know how to answer your question. I'm going to think on your question. I don't have like the power to do that right now. But yeah, if you like fasted for a day, the thing is it's taking your averages, right? So it's not saying like, okay, you didn't eat yesterday, so we're not going to give you any basal insulin today. Like it's taking the average over a long period of time. So if you have a few days that are like way out of whack, you eat a ton, it's your birthday and you're having cake and all this stuff or whatever, or you have a day where you're doing a 24-hour fast, please don't do that. But you know, who knows? It's going to know that that's like an anomaly, right? So that's my answer without the answer.
Yeah. Also, by the way, everyone, we haven't said it yet, but like we're not doctors.
Yeah.
We're just simply people who have type 1 diabetes that want to talk about our own experiences. None of this is medical advice. This is all just like what, you know, our lifestyles are like with this technology and what we think of it. So just take it with a grain of salt.
Yes.
Go on. So was there anything else so you were saying though about how that's the insulin to carb ratio. So kind of like tell us like where you ended up with that and kind of like how you got control of that control.
So there's like so many parts to this. So I apologize if it feels like I'm going everywhere. Like there's honestly so much to understand. But one thing I know a lot of people kind of get frustrated with Omnipod 5 is that they get theirs, and this is on other looping systems too, so not exclusive to O5, but you give your bolus, and then because you have that insulin on board, your pump tells you like your blood sugar's fine, but you have insulin on board, so we're going to suspend your basal insulin. Okay, so that's like something that happens. Now with the Omnipod 5, because of the way that the system is working, number one, you have more accurate basals than you probably do on another pump. Number two, you have this kind of suspension of basal after you give a bolus, even if you're eating. So what's going to happen is that if you increase that insulin to carb ratio, and again, this is my experience, not a doctor. When you increase that insulin to carb ratio, there's a point, it's so cool when you get there. There's this point where like it works so that I'm giving a lot more insulin than I would have on a dash pump, but the way that it hits, it like sticks the landing every single time. Because that paused insulin kind of acts as like a safety net where I don't have to get even the bolus exactly right, but because it's pausing that, I have enough of that bolus insulin to like keep it going. So it just like works itself out.
Yeah. It really is like these automated systems.
They're so smart.
It's like a warm blanket. They're like that's comforting you and or like it's like if you can be a little more comfortable making decisions about insulin because you know that it's got your back. You know, like it will do its best to catch you when you're going too high or too low and bring you more toward the middle so that your high or your low that you do experience maybe isn't as bad or nearly as close to where it could be.
Well, you know what? That's one of the biggest results that I've seen is just my standard deviation is wildly low. Yeah. Like that. Same. Like it's so cool to like I've never had standard deviation numbers like I do now. That's honestly a really good indicator of like good diabetes.
That's long term, right? Yeah. You could be like, oh, I'm not high that often. Yeah, but if you're like hitting really high numbers and your standard deviation's getting wider, even though you're in range a lot, that's not the best thing for, I think, long term.
Totally.
Right. So I think standard deviation is a huge thing, and automated systems like this definitely make that way smaller. I've seen that. So now alerts. Do you get alerts from the Omnipod 5? How do you get them, and when is it sending you alerts? Like, is it asking you questions? Like, do you have to accept things? Like, I feel like that's what I've heard. Maybe.
Yeah, so it won't alert you if you're high. So there's no high alert. But I still get that on my phone. There is a low alert for an urgent low. So for me, that's when I'm below 55, I believe. It just automatically goes off.
So both a Dexcom and an Omnipod 5 alert, 2 alerts?
Yes.
Okay.
If I'm that, and again, I don't go, the one cool thing about the Omnipod 5 is I do go low sometimes, but like, it's so rare. Like, it's compared to how I used to be, like, I go all the time. But yeah, so you'll get a beep from your Omnipod 5 and your Dexcom. It's like, I know, okay, I'm treating it. But yeah, so you can get alerts, and yeah, you just have to say okay in it, and then it goes away, I think. I'm second guessing.
Does it ask you, like, before it changes your treatment, does it ever ask you to accept things, or is that it's just always automating and it doesn't? I feel like someone once told me it like asks you, like, do you accept these changes? Is that true or no?
I don't think so.
Okay. I feel like you would know instantly if that was the case. Like, so, like, it's just doing its thing. It's constantly regulating. I'm not asking. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I wanted to make sure. So, when it comes to like other like customization features, so one thing with like the system I'm on Loop with my phone, I have so much customization. I think that's one reason why I haven't jumped to Omnipod 5. Yeah, it's between that and also the fact that Loop works with my iPhone, which is really fantastic. Omnipod 5 is working on an application. As soon as it comes to iPhone, it's already on a bunch of Galaxy devices that I may consider it. But tell me about customization, because that's really important to me. What can you customize, especially when it comes to like overrides and things, like for like working out and different activities?
Can you go over customization? Because, like, do you mean like...
Are you able to set temporary overrides? I guess, it's so funny because I call it customization because it truly
I don't know that lingo,
but it truly is, like, I can customize so many different things. But, like, if you're going to work out, can you set a different range? Like, what do you do? Like, are you able to change ranges or basal treatments, whatever that is?
Yeah, so there is, like, an activity feature. And so it's... I'll read you what it says. It says, the activity feature reduces basal insulin delivery and sets basal delivery target glucose to 150. So it raises your target to 150, what I just said. And it's pretty aggressive in kind of just like pausing your insulin right away, which is really cool because this is exactly what I used to do when I was on the dash, is I would like decrease my basal by like, 75% for 30 minutes leading up. I only have to use activity feature when I'm doing cardio.
Okay, same. Yeah. Same.
Otherwise, like weightlifting or like anything like that, I just do it and it works.
Same.
There is besides that, I don't think there's like any other customization. Like you can always hop into manual mode and like put on a temp basal or do something like that. But it would just be activity feature. That's kind of like the override to auto mode.
Do you ever go into manual mode?
The only time I've really ever done it is like, when have I done it? Oh, when my Dexcom's acting up. When I don't trust my Dexcom numbers, that's when I hop into manual mode, which doesn't happen a lot, so not often.
Yeah. Is there any, like, tell us a little bit more, like, about how you're using the Omnipod 5 throughout the day.
Yeah.
Like, when you're eating specific foods, I don't know, are there any certain ways that you kind of use it?
Yeah.
Tips and tricks maybe, like, to Omnipod 5?
Yeah. So again, just the biggest tip and trick is just if you're noticing high blood sugars, increase your IC ratios. That's the biggest tip and trick of them all. If you take anything away from this and you're on Omnipod 5 or want to go on it, IC ratios, bump them up. But beyond that, like, I would just say that I do still do a little bit of pre-bolusing. It's pretty much the same as the traditional dash that I use for pre-bolusing. There is not an extended bolus in auto mode. You can always hop back into manual mode and do the extended bolus if you want to do that. I personally have so much more success just doing a split bolus in the auto mode feature, because kind of the combination of being able to raise that basal, plus give like 2 or 3 doses with a split bolus really helps me with like high fat foods like pizza, takeout, anything with like, that's really good.
Yeah. One thing I really love about the system I'm on, Loop, and it's also something I hope that they introduce into Omnipod 5 in the future, and honestly, I think they will, is the ability to select the type of food you're eating when you're putting in carbs. So on my app, I'm able to choose between 3 different types. I can actually, there's more than that, but basically 3 types. I can click lollipop, taco, or pizza, which signify very fast absorption, mid absorption, and long absorption. Like pizza takes a long time. And what that tells your system is when this food is going to hit your bloodstream. So it can better, the algorithm's even stronger because of that, right? Because if you drink orange juice, it's going to hit your blood sugar way faster than if you eat pizza. And the pump knowing that, the pump looping system knowing that, makes it so much stronger. I have a very big hunch that Omnipod will be coming out with that. But for now, that's one thing that I would miss if I moved to Omnipod.
Yeah.
So what you're saying though is the way you, because it sounds like, having never even experienced what I have, like you're coping with it in a way that you've kind of learned to like give yourself multiple boluses over a long period of time, right?
Yeah. So
or
essentially,
like, food.
So like if I was eating pizza, for example, classic example,
right?
Everyone knows that. Instead of just giving the full bolus up front, I'll give like a third up front and then usually like 2/3 on the back end, like 2 or 3 hours later. And it's great.
Yeah.
And I have that safety net. So if that's too much or not enough, like the Omnipod 5 will catch it. So I did try once going into manual mode to do the extended bolus and I went low.
Yeah.
Because I just
so you're better off doing it. You're better off staying automated and doing those multiple patches. Yeah. Pizza is like one of my favorite things, and that was the hardest thing I think to get used to. Yeah. Like I've had some of my worst lows and my worst highs with pizza because it's difficult to comprehend. I think though the longer you have type 1 and eat pizza, you start to get a hang of it. So it's, I guess the nice thing about Omnipod 5, it sounds like that, you can feel a little more comfortable doing these experiments, safely. Also, like talking to your doctor about it or a diabetes educator is probably really good. Like I'm as good as I am with carb counting because of my diabetes educator. I highly recommend anyone who has access to one. Many insurances cover them for free, diabetes education. So it's definitely something to look into with your insurance. Yeah.
Hold on. I just want to answer a question here.
Yeah, please.
Mike says, how do you know when to do split boluses? I do them. So if I know that the food has like, I would say the threshold's like 30 or 40 grams of fat, or if I just like know it's something that has a high fat content and a high carb content, that's when I'll do split bolus. It's, again, like I tried to give a number just to give a little bit of concrete, but it is a little bit of intuition. Like, for example, like if I went out to eat at like a restaurant and had like chips and guac and had like, you know, a big meal too, like I'd probably do it there too. So it's anytime that I'm eating something that I know is like fried or that has just like a bunch of cheese on it, those are kind of like my signs that like I'm probably going to need a split bolus.
Interesting. We have a great question from Emma. She says, what happens with the Omnipod when your Dexcom doesn't work or has like a sensor failure or, like a brief sensor issue, like period?
Well, I will say I'm pretty lucky when it comes to Dexcoms that like it does not happen very often to me. The one time that I can think that it did happen, it was just like it was, you know, when it's just like spotty or another one, so you have hope and you're like maybe it'll work out, but then it doesn't. I just go into manual mode, and if the problem like lasted long enough, I'd probably end up changing my Dexcom and then hop right back into audit mode.
Great. Awesome. Don't worry, people. We are going to be answering a few more questions. I have a few more questions to get through. And again, this is going up on my YouTube channel where you can ask more questions. Both Meg and I will be looking at those to make sure that we get them answered. And we also have the Dexcom 271 up on Meg's YouTube channel, our conversation on that. Let's answer Michael's question. He asked if, like, when in the process, again, like, you're not a doctor.
Oh, yeah.
You're not a doctor, but, like, what do you kind of do? What have you found works well for you, like, time-wise, splitting those boluses?
It's not the same for every single food, but typically it's like 2, 3, or 4 hours after eating. I have two reels on my Instagram where I break down, like, how I find that timing. So I recommend checking that out, and that might answer your question.
Yeah.
And if DM me.
And typically, what my app says, which comes from like very smart people, it says that like foods like that hit your blood sugar faster. I think is that a low glycemic index when they hit your high. So foods with a high glycemic index tend to hit you like as soon as 30 minutes, like really quickly. Like overall general foods that with carbs tend to be like 3 hours, and then high fat foods are like up to 5 hours, even like 4 to 5 hours. They can still be hitting your blood sugar, which is why they're so tricky. So one thing I want to cover that we didn't talk about yet that seems to be important with your system is placement of the Dexcom and the Omnipod 5. Like, the Omnipod 5 says they need to be in sight. Have you found that that's true?
Yes.
Okay.
So to an extent, not to the extent that they've said. So I found that I can be a little bit, you know, free with some of the spacing, but there has been a few times, like if I have it on my arm, first one I ever put on, I had something on my arm and something on the opposite lower back, and I kept losing connection. And it wouldn't be for like hours at a time. It would be like I just noticed that there were readings missing on the Omnipod 5. But essentially the thought is you want to keep them like somewhat in the line of sight because it's the pod that's talking to the transmitter. So a few notes about this. Number one, I've said this on TikTok before and people like come at me and they're like, I've never had a problem and I've worn them all over. And I'm like, that's amazing. Like, good for you.
I love that for you.
But I have had problems. But that being said, like if I wear one on the back of my arm and then the other one like on my leg on the opposite side, it still usually works fine. It's not like the end of the world if they're not like right next to each other. But I definitely might miss a reading every hour or something, which is like not that bad. But in general, if I like have my one gadget on the front, I try to keep the other one on the front of my body somewhere. And then same with the back of my body. And then my arms, I kind of think is like limbo. They can go either way. That's kind of how I, very short summary, like do it. Right now they're both on my stomach. Yeah. It's not as complicated as I think some people, like like when I first went into it, I was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm gonna have to change it and then have this like system. Like I just kind of, it's like the same kind of system that I had before, but I just pay a little bit more attention to like the side of my body that it's on.
Yeah, and you kind of learn like what works well for your body. And
yeah.
Placements. You kind of start like a little bit new routine.
Yeah.
That's understandable. We have a question asking when the Dexcom G7 will be ready for Omnipod. I specifically asked the CEO this question in an interview that's on my YouTube channel. I didn't get a super straight answer, but what he did say, I think he said, was like the first of the year possibly, which would be, first of next year, which sounds like some time. It's not like an official answer, hopefully sooner. Tandem said that theirs would be coming any time between now and 3 months from now. So we can only hope that Omnipod 5 would be faster. But the thing is, and a point he made was Omnipod 5 is relatively new, right? So like I think that Insulet, the owner, is still kind of figuring out Omnipod 5 in some ways too. I don't know how ready they are to like introduce this new CGM yet, but hopefully faster. I'm loving the G7 and it's super smart.
Yeah. We have a question that says, do you use activity mode at any time other than when you're exercising? And then they say, example, a night out. My night outs are exercising. I am ripping up the dance floor.
Yeah.
So of course I'm using it.
Yeah.
But yes, I do. Anytime that I'm doing any kind of activity like that I know will lower my blood sugar, I'm typically hopping into activity mode.
Yeah. Same here. Biking.
Yep.
Dancing. Because like I don't just like go like that. Like I go, like jumping around.
It's full sweat on the dance floor. Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. And then sometimes you're sweating so much because you're low and you have to go to the bar. Be like, medical emergency. I need some orange juice. All right, so let's start wrapping things up. I want to ask you kind of like, what is some advice that you would give to someone who is considering, or rather someone who's about to get on Omnipod 5?
Yeah, I think it just goes back to the idea of like, again, not a doctor, but like increasing if you notice high blood sugars, increase your ratios, both correcting factor and IC ratio. Like that is how you, like, an algorithm is only as good as its data, and like that's how you feed it the best data, is by like letting it know I need more.
Okay.
Period.
Yeah.
And from the and you'll see.
That makes sense. And then we keep getting a question. I don't want you to answer it if it's not like comfortable, because I know time and range is like more of a personal thing.
Yeah.
But like if you want to talk about it, Dan's asking like what your time and range is on Omnipod 5. He's also looping, so I guess he's.
I can't. Can I leave Instagram, or is it gonna kick me out? Okay.
I don't know. I don't know that. Or just tell us. So tell us about kind of like how what you've noticed. Yeah. Don't leave.
So my time in range before I went on Omnipod 5 was probably like 90% in range. That was on the dash, like on average.
That's really good.
Well, and that's my point. It's like I have a good time in range. So like my like change, I think I have like probably the same, if not a little bit more, way less lows. So definitely more time in range because of that. Maybe I'm like 92, 93 ish.
That's incredible.
I don't know.
And like also for anyone watching who's like, I'm not even close, don't worry.
Yeah.
Because that's just like, that's really high. Endos and diabetes educators say like as long as you're above 70%, like 70% above, like you're in a good, like you're a lot less likely to have like long-term effects, which it's always been my goal to be above 70 at least. That's what I'm always hoping for. And my time in range looping, but you also don't eat gluten, right? That must help a little bit, right?
I don't think it does. Because I still eat carbs. Like,
That's true.
But
you're right.
I I was not, first of all, I was not always at 90% in range. In fact, when I first went on the Freestyle Libre back in like 2018, I had like 40% in range. And I was like, how? I just like learned everything there was to know about diabetes. Like, this is my career. I'm going into career in nutrition. So like, I know this stuff. And so I'm not a great example to be like, wow, like she had a huge jump in her time in range because it didn't change too much, but it's just easier for me to stay there now. And my standard deviation is like wildly lower. Like that's been the biggest data improvement that I've seen, like results wise.
Yeah, and I think it goes to show that like you can just do the best you can, but like you can work hard. Like you can, anything's achievable if you I guess work hard. Like hearing your numbers, it even gives me like this hope of like, oh wow, maybe I can even get mine a little stronger.
1 year in, Justin.
And I'm also very happy with
so
mine.
Much to learn.
But I'm like 98%, like okay, that's great. But like, at the end of the day, I think what matters most is doing the best you can, right? And using this technology to the best of your ability, and using resources like this, I guess, to communicate. I think both you and I have probably grown a lot just because of this community and learned so much. And it's also like why you do what you do.
Yeah, I would not be like where I am with my diabetes or anything with like I've learned like so much. Like today, like right before we hopped on, like Justin just taught me something new, which is that the short lasting insulin thing is like more effective than long lasting.
Oh yeah. So what I was
stuff like that. I'm like, geez, like
What I was told, just to like say what that was, I was told that long-acting insulin, like Lantus, Basaglar, things like that people who are MDI use, that's not as an effective insulin as like what we use in pumps and what people who are also on MDI use as short-term. That type of insulin is much more effective. But with a pump, luckily you get that given to you throughout the day as your like long-acting insulin. On MDI, you can't be giving yourself a shot of insulin every 10 minutes as your long-acting, unless you like don't have anything else to do. So, I mean, you could try. But and we had someone say, I lost the comment, but someone said like it truly like time and age also, you get better with time. Like it took me, I'm still learning, but it took me a year to fully feel comfortable and somewhat confident in treating myself. This is a lifelong journey because you're constantly doing new things, eating new things, but age and time and experience with this truly helps you just become stronger at this. And you're such a great example of that. Like you've been dealing with this since you were 5, right? You've had a lot of practice. Yeah. Right? And I'm so glad that you're on a system that like seems to like, and this is important. Tell us about kind of your mental health on Omnipod 5, because I think that's an important thing to talk about.
Well, I think, this is like a great topic to kind of like end on, because like I think that's the biggest benefit that it's given me is like, like I had a great time in range on the Dash too, but it took a lot more work. And with Omnipod 5, like it's able, like I was talking about, like it kind of gives you that like double level of automation where it's like, I don't have to like always be like, oh, is my basal right? Is my basal right? Like, am I, because a basal is your foundation for everything else. Like if your basals aren't right, like you'll notice high blood sugars at like the randomest times. You'll be like, what? Like, why is that happening? So it really just like simplifies things, I guess is the best way to put it, which then in turn gives me so much more energy to like do everything else that I want to do and like actually live my life. So at the end of the day, like that's the most important part to me.
Yeah, I agree. Being on a looped system has allowed me to be in the moment more often and allow myself to not look at my numbers until I need to treat them. And like really go hours, if not like sometimes days where I'm like, oh, I didn't even realize I have diabetes. Like, I'm like, oh wow, like I just went a whole day. You know, obviously you're plugging in food, but like you didn't have to correct yourself highs and lows.
Yeah, it's not like chasing it.
Yeah.
It's things come a lot more like, yeah, you're just able to kind of like, yeah.
Yeah.
I totally.
So like that alone, like I would highly recommend someone who's looking for a way of treatment with diabetes that can kind of allow them to be more in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
A looping system like Omnipod 5, Tandems, T-Slim, or even the looping that I do, these could be options for you. This was amazing. Thank you so much, Meg, for joining me today. For anyone who joined in late or has a friend that had to leave early, we are putting this interview conversation up on my YouTube channel. You can find that link and subscribe to that channel in my bio at my profile. And then on Meg's YouTube channel, she has our conversation from 2 weeks ago all about Dexcom G7. And if you want to watch that, that's in her link in her bio. And let us know. Comment on these videos with any questions. Let us know if you want to see more of these and what those topics could be, because this has been like super fun. And then follow us. You've got the information here. And we've got lots of information for you.
Yep.
This was awesome. Thank you, Meg.
Yeah, thanks for everyone for coming, and thanks, Justin. And yeah, any questions that you guys have, just like drop them on the YouTube and I'll be happy to answer them.
Great. All right. Good night, everyone. Thanks for your awesome questions.
Bye, everyone.
We'll see you soon.
I hope you guys enjoyed that video. I've got so much more for you. For now, you should totally check out that Dexcom G7 video with Meg on her channel. I've also got my interview with Dexcom's CEO on this channel. You should watch that. And next week, I think I'm coming out with my diagnosis story. I can't wait for you to hear it. It is pretty shocking. I got diagnosed on TikTok. Until then, totally subscribe to the channel. Check out my social medias. I'm Justin, and I'll talk to you later.